Hey, everybody, gearing up for a big weekend of NFL football. Week number 2 at Bookmaker. Anytime, anywhere. Check your smartphone. Current updated odds are available to you. Free, easy to open up an account, bookmaker.eu. The guys are all in town. Brian Blessing, Kenny White, Bruce Marshall. Let's have at it. Let's start with a trifecta. Early, middle afternoon, late game. New Orleans at Carolina. The line is 2.5. Saints favored on the road. The total in the game is 51 at Bookmaker. Kenny, let me just throw it to you and start on this. Is this number an overreaction to what happened with the Saints last week? Last week, what would you have made this line?
I'd probably be looking at about 3.5, 4 in the game. I think it is a little bit of a reaction, but to my surprise, I got interesting numbers. Heard a lot about the Saints defense, and I thought the Saints defense was okay until I went back to look at my ratings, and I have them rated number 28 in the NFL defensively.
Wow. How about what we saw last week from New Orleans, Bruce, specifically? We're trying to make a decision here. How do we treat this team? The distractions, of course, but I think you do have to give Shanahan credit because he's an opening day guru. Are we caught somewhere in the middle there?
I think we are. My gut feel it was probably a one-off last week with the Saints blowing that game against the Redskins. However, there are some legitimate concerns down there. Sean Payton's absence, let's not minimize his impact. He's one of the best game planners and play callers in the league. Now, Drew Brees should compensate for that, but you never know. It could be a negative for them. Last week, we saw Brees make some uncharacteristic mistakes. I think Washington's defense and Jim Haslett had something to do with that. But the Saints had to abandon the ground game a bit early, Kenny, last week. I think it hurt them. It hurt them in their ability to come back. My gut feel, though, that might be just a one-off for the Saints.
From an odds-making perspective, Kenny, just the hodgepodge of what's going on the sidelines. I mean, we can't diminish it when we'll stand there and give kudos to a guy and say that coaching mismatch is worth a point or a point and a half. How have you treated what's going on with New Orleans?
Well, basically, looking at the first game, RG3 put up unbelievable Hall of Fame numbers in his first game ever in the NFL, and that was the reason I had to go back to look at the defense to see where I had him rated. This is a very weak defense, and RG3 talked about it, that every time he came to the line of scrimmage, he said he could tell the Saints were guessing what they were going to do. So this is a team that's well underprepared. When they had 7 weeks to prepare for this game, now they only have a week to prepare for Newton. Now, they did see him twice last year. I think this defense is in a lot of trouble.
Bruce, is our good friend Kenny says, every game's a snowflake. We're looking at a total of 51, and we're talking about a Carolina offense that just never got untracked against Tampa Bay.
You're right, Brian. It didn't, and that total might be a tad bit high here. Carolina's problem last week, and Kenny, you noticed this too, they stopped running the football. They kept the ball in Cam Newton's hands the whole time. Now, he can run some too, but they went away from D'Angelo Williams very early, only 6 carries last week. In fact, I think Carolina runners only had 10 carries altogether last week. They've simply got to balance this thing out a little bit better. And we saw Tampa Bay limit the escape route there, clog the escape lanes for Cam Newton, and it really kept him in the pocket and frustrated him. I think Carolina's got to address this if they want to progress forward.
All right, let's go to the late afternoon game, and that will be the Jets at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh laying 6. Total here is 41.5. Same deal, Kenny. Start with the number. Pittsburgh played pretty well at Denver, but they come up short, and we just know the sense of urgency that will be out there for teams trying to avoid going 0-2, and people saw the Jets play really well, and are they overreacting to that?
Oh, there's definitely going to be a little overreaction. Not a great overreaction to the Jets win, but Pittsburgh, you're right. They need to come up with a better performance. Defensively, they will get more healthy this week. Hopefully, James Harrison will go back in the lineup. When he's in this defensive lineup for the Steelers at home, they are an impossible team to score against. They've allowed, last 3 games of the year, they allowed 10 points. 10 points in their last 3 games. They only allowed one team to score more than 17 on them at Heinz Field. This team will be ready and be playing great defense.
And the Jets, as good as it was, Bruce, they've got to do a better job running the football, especially against this team.
Yeah, they do. I'm talking about one-offs a second ago with the Saints game. I think that might have been a one-off with the Jets last week. I blame Buffalo for a lot of that defensive breakdowns there. I mean, we talked about it. Mark Sanchez had all day to look passing in the pocket there, no pressure, and it worked out very well for the Jets. But you're right, they do have to establish that ground game. That's the one difference, Kenny. We talk about the Jets last year when they fell apart, as opposed to the first 2 years, especially Rex Ryan's first year in 2009. They led the league in rushing. Last year down to number 23. So the addition of Tony Sparano as the offensive coordinator that wants to regenerate the running game with Sean Green, and we'll see more of Tim Tebow in the Wildcat looks this week.
Kenny, public team, Pittsburgh at 6. Are there 7s in our future?
It's a good question. I think you'll see 6.5. Not sure if you'll see it go all the way to 7. People know the Jets put up 48 last week. going to say this about the Jets. They may not score 48 in the next 4 weeks.
Let's go to the Sunday night game. Same question, Kenny. San Francisco's laying 6.5, hosting Detroit. The totals on the game's 46. There are subplots, but let's start with the number 6.5. Niners beat the Packers. You got the cross-country travel, in essence, for Detroit. Do we see 7 in this game?
You probably will, because everyone remembers what they saw last. Detroit struggled with St. Louis, and San Francisco just put it on Green Bay wire to wire. Let's go back to last year real quick. This game was set up. San Francisco 4-1, making their 3rd trip past the Mississippi in 6 weeks. Detroit 5-0. Detroit a 5-point favorite. A great battle. San Francisco comes out with the win 25-19. The game goes under by half a point, and then we have the handshake at the end of the game. Schwartz was not happy with Harbaugh. This is going to be a war this week.
Let me just ask you, Bruce, it's almost the same deal. We're talking, go back to the Jets game. Specifically for Detroit to hang around in this game. Last year, the games Kenny spoke of, the Niners had over 200 yards rushing. We know Detroit is a mash unit at running back, but they've got to find a way to run the football. The same question for this team. You know, Stafford had 3 picks last week.
That's right. They don't want to rely completely on Matthew Stafford, and this is going to be important for the Lions as they progress this year. I think it was important last year, that game Kenny mentioned a second ago, the 25-19. After Detroit started 5-0, they started going back and forth after that. Their season started to unravel. They weren't covering games as much. The one trend, though, to kind of note about Detroit that has endured, in fact, back into 2010, even the end of 29, was the fact they keep going over. 24-12-2 over now their last 38 games. They didn't quite go over last year against the Niners, but that has been the trend line, totals-wise, for Detroit.
Here's the grandiose between the lines question to wrap things up here. An incredible win for San Francisco at Green Bay. Is this a letdown spot, or do they take that game and run with it and say, we are the team?
I think it is a little bit of a letdown. They beat Detroit last year. They just beat Green Bay on the road. They're feeling really well about themselves. They played an A-plus game. I think it's very difficult for any professional team to carry over and continue to play A-plus games. They're going to be good in this game. They're going to be great on the season. I like this team from the beginning. They were the team I picked, was one of my picks for the Super Bowl. I thought San Francisco would win the NFC, but this game right here scares me. I think Detroit gives them a great game.
I think so, too. Although I would point out San Francisco didn't have many letdowns last year, and they were 8-1-1 against the number at Candlestick a year ago, and it was flawless offensive and defensive execution at Green Bay. But, like Kenny said, that was a huge opener, so maybe a little letdown could be expected.
We thank the fellas. Great information. Bookmakers got you covered all day long. It's week 2 coming your way in the National Football League.